The night my best friend found out I was gay, I wasn't planning on telling him. Definitely not like that. And I sure as hell wasn't prepared for what he said afterward. It happened in Brandon's garage of all places. The same garage where we'd spent half our teenage years pretending we were going to fix cars, start bands, or somehow figure our lives out with a couple of cheap beers and bad music playing in the background. That garage had seen breakups, drunken confessions, fist bumps, and more late-night talks than I could count. I thought I knew everything that could possibly happen there. Turns out I was wrong. Brandon and I had been best friends since sophomore year of high school. He was the kind of guy people noticed without him trying, tall, broad-shouldered, the type who made friends easily and never seemed to doubt himself. I was not that. I was quieter, more observant, always thinking a step ahead and usually holding something back. Somehow, we balanced each other out. After college, we both ended up back in our hometown for different reasons. He moved into his parents' place temporarily to save money. I rented a small apartment 10 minutes away. We slipped right back into our old routine like no time had passed. Gym together, takeout on Fridays, beers in the garage on weekends. The only difference was that now, I was carrying a secret that had gotten heavier every year. I was gay, and Brandon didn't know. I come out to a few people already, carefully, strategically. Friends I knew would be fine, people who already suspected. Brandon wasn't on that list, not because I thought he'd freak out, but because I couldn't imagine what us would look like afterward. He was my constant, the one person I never had to filter myself around. Losing that scared me more than rejection ever had. That night, we were sitting on the hood of his car, legs dangling, sharing a six-pack. It was late summer, still warm even after dark. Music hummed quietly from his phone, some old playlist we'd listened to 100 times before. "So," Brandon said, cracking open another beer, "you still dodging relationships on purpose? Or is that just your thing now?" I laughed it off. "Maybe I just have high standards. Or maybe you're hiding something," he said, smirking. I rolled my eyes, but my stomach tightened. Brandon had always been perceptive. Annoyingly so. We sat in silence for a minute, the kind that's comfortable because it doesn't demand anything. I should have let it stay that way. Instead, my phone buzzed in my hand. A message. From a guy I'd been seeing casually. Nothing dramatic, just a "last night was fun" kind of text. Brandon noticed my face change. Of course he did. "Who's that?" he asked casually. "No one," I said too quickly. He raised an eyebrow. "Kyle, I've known you for like 15 years. Try again." I hesitated. Just a second too long. And then he said it, half joking, half serious. "Wait. Is it a guy?" The air shifted. Subtle but real. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Could have lied. I almost did. But something about the way he asked, calm, curious, not accusatory, made it feel pointless. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It's a guy." Brandon didn't say anything right away. He just took a sip of his beer, staring straight ahead. My mind spiraled, filling the silence with worst-case scenarios. Awkwardness, distance, the slow death of a friendship I wasn't ready to lose. Then he turned to look at me. "Oh," he said, and smiled. Not the polite, forced kind. Not the uncomfortable one. A real smile. Soft. Almost relieved. "That's it?" I asked before I could stop myself. "That's it," he said. "I mean, I kind of figured." My brain short-circuited. "You what?" He shrugged. "You never talk about girls. Ever. And you check out dudes way more than you think you do." I stared at him, stunned. "And you never said anything?" "Wasn't my place," he said simply. "You'd tell me when you were ready." That should have been the moment everything settled. The moment I relaxed. But instead, my chest felt tight in a completely different way. Because then he added, casually, like he was commenting on the weather, "I was just wondering when you'd finally stop lying about it." I laughed, nervous. I wasn't lying. He looked at me, then really looked at me. "You don't have to do that with me," he said. "Not ever." Something about the way he said it made my throat burn. I thought that was the unexpected part. I was wrong, because what Brandon did next was something I never saw coming at all. After he said that, neither of us spoke for a moment. The music kept playing quietly from his phone, some old track we'd probably listened to a dozen times back in high school, but suddenly it felt too loud. I stared down at the concrete floor of the garage, tracing oil stains with my eyes like they might give me something safe to focus on. "You okay?" Brandon asked. "Yeah," I said automatically. Then I exhaled and corrected myself. "I mean, yeah, just didn't expect this to be so easy." He snorted. "Dude, you really thought I was gonna freak out? I didn't know what you'd do," I admitted. "That's kind of the point." He nodded slowly like he actually understood that. "Fair." Another pause. This one heavier. "So," he said finally, leaning back against the windshield. "How long? How long what? How long have you known?" I thought about it. About all the half-truths I'd told myself over the years. Probably since college. Maybe earlier. I just didn't want to deal with it back then. And now I'm tired of pretending I'm someone I'm not. Brandon glanced at me sideways. "Does that pretending include me?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said carefully, "have you been holding back around me?" I swallowed. The honest answer was yes. Not in the way he might think, but in 1,000 small ways. The jokes I didn't make. The comments I swallowed. The looks I forced myself not to linger on for too long. "Yeah," I said quietly, "probably more than with anyone else." He didn't look offended. If anything, he looked thoughtful. "That's crap," he said. I let out a humorless laugh. "You're telling me?" He bumped his shoulder lightly against mine. "Well, you don't have to do that anymore." Something about the casual way he said it hit me harder than any dramatic speech could have. I nodded, afraid if I spoke my voice would crack. We sat there like that for a bit, shoulders almost touching, the late-night air thick and warm around us. Then Brandon cleared his throat. "So, are you seeing anyone? Like, seriously?" I hesitated. "Not seriously. Just getting my feet wet, I guess." He smirked. "Figures. What's that supposed to mean?" "You've always been cautious. Overthinking everything." He paused. "You happy, though?" I considered it. "I think I'm getting there." He smiled again, softer this time. "Good. You deserve that." I felt my face heat up, suddenly very aware of how close he was sitting, of how familiar he felt, and yet how different everything was now that the truth was out there between us. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Always." "Did it change anything for you, knowing I'm gay?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared ahead, jaw tightening just slightly. "I don't think so," he said slowly. "I mean, you're still you. Still my best friend." Relief washed through me. "But before I could fully relax," he added. "Though I'd be lying if I said it didn't make me think about some stuff." My heart skipped. "Like what?" He glanced at me, then looked away again. "Like how close we've always been. How much we rely on each other." I tried to keep my tone light. "Pretty sure straight guys do that too." "Yeah," he said. "But not always like we do." The silence that followed was different. Not awkward. Charged. I shifted slightly, suddenly unsure where to put my hands. "Brandon Dash. I'm not saying it's a bad thing," he interrupted quickly. "Just unexpected." I nodded. "Trust me, this whole night's been unexpected for me too." That made him chuckle, easing the tension just a bit. "Hey," he said, standing up suddenly and holding a hand out to me. "Come on." "Where?" "Inside. I'm starving. And I think we've done enough emotional damage for one night." I laughed and took his hand without thinking. The moment our palms touched, something subtle but unmistakable passed between us. Not sparks, not fireworks, just awareness, warmth, familiarity with a new edge to it. He didn't let go right away. Our eyes met, and for half a second, the world seemed to narrow down to just the two of us standing there in that garage. Then he squeezed my hand once and released it. Inside the house, everything felt strangely normal. Too normal. Like the universe was pretending nothing monumental had just happened. We grabbed leftovers from the fridge, ate at the kitchen counter, talked about random stuff, work, gym, some movie he wanted me to watch. But underneath it all, there was something else now. A current running between us. When I finally stood up to leave, Brandon walked me to the door. "Hey, Kyle," he said. "Yeah. I'm glad you told me." I smiled. "Me too." I stepped outside, the night air cooler now, clearer. As I walked to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. What I didn't realize yet, what I couldn't have realized, was that coming out to Brandon wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious, surprisingly. I wasn't, but because my brain wouldn't shut up. Every little moment kept replaying on a loop. Brandon's smile when I told him. The way he'd said, "You don't have to do that with me." The weight of his hand when he pulled me up off the hood of his car. Nothing had happened. And yet, something definitely had. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 8:17 a.m. "Brandon, you alive?" "Brandon, or did coming out take all your energy?" I smiled before I could stop myself. "Me barely. Me, emotional exhaustion is real." "Brandon, dramatic." "Brandon, gym later?" Same Brandon. Same routine. And somehow, not. At the gym, everything felt normal on the surface. We lifted, joked, talked shit about the guy hogging the bench press. But I was hyper-aware of him in a way I'd never allowed myself to be before. The stretch of his shoulders when he reached for the bar. The way sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. How close he stood when he spotted me. His hand hovering at my waist. Ready. I told myself I was imagining things. That I was just newly out and projecting. Still, when his hand brushed my lower back, barely there, probably accidental, I felt it everywhere. "You good?" he asked, noticing I'd frozen mid-rep. "Yeah," I said quickly. "Just distracted." "By what?" he asked, half smiling. I met his eyes. Held them for a beat too long. "Life," I said. He didn't push. He never did. After the gym, we grabbed smoothies like always. Sat in his truck, music low, windows cracked. The silence was comfortable, but loaded. "You ever wish," Brandon said suddenly, staring out the windshield, "that people were just honest from the start?" I turned toward him. "About what?" "About who they are. What they want." He shrugged. "Would have saved a lot of confusion." My heart picked up speed. "You confused about something?" He glanced at me, then away again. "Maybe." I waited. He didn't continue. That night, he invited me over again. No garage this time, his parents were out, so we had the house to ourselves. We ordered pizza, sprawled on the couch, half watching a movie neither of us cared about. At some point, he kicked off his shoes and stretched out. He did, pushing my leg aside with his own, claiming space like he always had. Except now, instead of pulling away, I stayed exactly where I was. Neither of us commented on it. Halfway through the movie, Brandon muted the TV. "Kyle," he said. My stomach flipped. "Yeah. I've been thinking." "Oh." He huffed a laugh. "About what you said. About pretending." I swallowed. "Okay. I don't think you're the only one who's been doing that." The room felt smaller. "What do you mean?" He turned toward me fully now, one arm stretched along the back of the couch behind me. "I've always thought of myself as straight," he said slowly. "Never really questioned it." "And now?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "And now," he said, "I'm questioning why the idea of you dating someone else feels wrong." My breath caught. "Brandon Dash, I'm not saying I have answers," he cut in quickly. "I just, when you told me you were gay, it flipped something in my head. Like it gave me permission to notice things I'd been ignoring." "Like what?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Like how you're the person I tell everything to. How I miss you when you're not around." His jaw tightened. "Like how I don't want anyone else stepping into that space." My pulse was loud enough to drown out the muted TV. "That doesn't automatically mean Dash," I started. "I know," he said, "but it doesn't not mean something either." We sat there, inches apart, the air thick with unspoken tension. "I don't want to mess this up," I said honestly. "Me neither," he replied. "That's why I'm telling you instead of pretending nothing's happening." That was so him. Direct. brave in a quiet way. "So what now?" I asked. He looked at me, really looked at me. "Now, I think we take this slow. We don't label anything. We don't rush. And if we cross a line?" I asked. A corner of his mouth lifted. "Then we deal with it together." Another pause. Longer this time. Without thinking, I leaned in just slightly, enough to make the intent clear. He didn't pull away. Instead, he closed the distance the rest of the way, resting his forehead against mine. His breath was warm, steady, familiar. "This okay?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," I whispered. "More than okay." We stayed like that for a long moment, suspended between friendship and something new, something terrifying and exciting all at once. But when I left, he hugged me tighter than he ever had before. And I absolutely knew that whatever we were stepping into next, there was no going back. The next week felt like walking around with a secret pressed right under my skin. Nothing about Brandon and me looked different from the outside. We still went to the gym, still argued over food choices, still texted dumb memes back and forth. But underneath all of it, there was this constant awareness, like we'd both stepped onto thin ice and were pretending not to notice the cracking sounds. We didn't talk about that night right away, and somehow that made it louder. It was Brandon who finally broke. We were driving back from the gym, his truck smelling faintly like sweat and protein powder, windows down, late afternoon sun cutting through the windshield. "You thinking about it too?" he asked suddenly. I didn't pretend not to know what he meant. "Yeah. Good," he said. "Thought I was losing my mind." I laughed, but it came out tight. "Same." He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. I keep replaying it, wondering if I imagined the tension, or if You didn't imagine it," I said quickly. He glanced at me, eyes searching my face. "Okay." That single word carried more relief than it should have. That night, he asked me to stay over. Not in a casual crash on the couch way, but deliberate. "You don't have to," he added. "Just thought it might be easier not to overthink alone." I agreed before my nerves could talk me out of it. We ended up in his room, sitting on opposite sides of the bed like teenagers who didn't know what to do with their hands. The light was low, his window cracked open, night sounds drifting in. "So," he said, exhaling. "Rules?" I blinked. "Rules? Yeah, boundaries. So neither of us freaks out later." I appreciated that more than he probably realized. "Okay. No pretending this didn't happen," he said first. "If something feels off, we say it." Agreed. "No pushing each other into labels." "I'm not there yet." "I'm not asking you to be." He nodded, visibly relaxing. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," I admitted. He smiled softly. "Same." That honesty did something to me. Made everything feel safer. "Can I dash?" he started, then stopped. "What?" He lifted a hand slowly, palm up between us. "Can I hold your hand?" God, just the fact that he asked. "Yeah," I said. His grip tightened slightly, like he was reassuring himself that this was real. We sat there like that for a while. No rush, no agenda. Then he leaned in and kissed my cheek. It was brief, careful, almost hesitant, but my chest ached afterward. He pulled back immediately, searching my face. "Okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, really okay." His shoulders dropped, tension releasing. "Good." Then he laughed under his breath, and I did too, and suddenly the tension cracked open into something warm and real. When I woke up the next morning, Brandon was already awake, watching me. "That's creepy," I said, smiling. "Shut up," he replied, smiling back. "I was just making sure this didn't disappear overnight." I squeezed his hand. Still here. So was he. And somehow that felt like the most unexpected and right thing of all. The next few weeks slipped into a rhythm that felt unreal in how natural it was. Brandon and I didn't suddenly become something obvious. There were no big announcements, no dramatic shifts. If anything, what we were doing lived in the quiet spaces in early mornings, late nights, and looks that lingered just a second longer than they used to. He didn't stop being Brandon. If anything, he became more himself. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Not in a hungry way. More like he was studying me, relearning me from a different angle. Other times, it was the small stuff, sitting closer than necessary on the couch. The way he'd brush past me in the kitchen and not apologize. None of it was rushed. And that made it intense in a completely different way. One night, about 3 weeks after that first kiss, we were back in his garage. Same place where everything had started. The door was open, cool air drifting in, music low. "This feels full circle," I said, glancing around. Brandon leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "Yeah, kinda wild." He watched me for a moment, then said, "You ever think about how different this could have gone?" "All the time," I admitted. "You could have freaked out, pulled away." He shook his head. "Nah, I don't think I ever could have done that with you." That hit harder than I expected. I stepped closer. "You okay lately? Like, really?" He exhaled slowly. "Yeah, confused, but not in a bad way." "You still okay with this?" he asked. "With me figuring things out as we go?" I nodded. "As long as you're honest with me." "I am," he said without hesitation. "More than I've ever been with anyone." I leaned in, resting my forehead against his. "Then I'm not going anywhere." His breath caught. "Okay," he muttered. "Yeah, I definitely don't hate this." I laughed softly. "High praise." He smirked, then grew serious again. "Kyle, I don't know what label fits me. I don't know what this makes me. I don't need you to know that yet," I said. "I just need you to know what this makes us." He looked up at me. "And what's that?" I smiled. "Something real." He nodded slowly. "I didn't expect this," he said softly. "Me neither. But," he added, turning his head to look at me, "I don't want to undo it." I smiled. "Good. Because I don't think I could." In that moment, it didn't matter what he'd call himself tomorrow, or how long it would take for the rest of the world to catch up. What mattered was this. My best friend didn't just accept who I was. He stepped toward me, and neither of us looked back. If I'm being honest, the hardest part wasn't what happened between Brandon and me. It was the after. Not in a bad way, just in a holy shit, this is real kind of way. The next morning, we woke up tangled together. Sunlight creeping through the garage windows he'd forgotten to cover the night before. He groaned first, squinting. "Wow," he muttered. "I really fell asleep out here." "You're getting old," I said. He snorted, then froze slightly, like something had just caught up with him. Slowly, he turned his head toward me. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey." We studied each other for a moment, searching for awkwardness, regret, that sudden emotional distance people warn you about. It wasn't there. Instead, Brandon smiled soft, real, a little stunned. "So, we're good?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, we're good." He exhaled, relief obvious. "Good." That word became important to us. A check-in, a reassurance. Over the next few days, we tested what this meant. We didn't tell anyone. Not because we were ashamed, but because it felt fragile, like something still forming that needed space to breathe. Brandon struggled more than I did. Not with me, but with what this meant for how he'd always seen himself. I could tell when his thoughts spiraled, he'd get quieter, more inward. One night, after a long silence, he finally said, "I feel like I'm betraying some version of myself." I turned toward him on the couch. "You're not betraying anyone. You're just learning something new." He frowned. "But what if people look at me differently?" "They probably will," I said honestly. "But the people who matter won't see you as less. Just more honest." He leaned back, rubbing his face. "You make it sound easy." "It wasn't," I admitted. "Coming out cost me some people. But it also gave me myself back." He looked at me then, eyes steady. "And us?" "And us?" I said. "Only exists because you didn't run from the question." That seemed to settle something in him. A week later, Brandon did something that shocked me more than any kiss ever could. He told someone. Not his parents. Not a big announcement. Just his older sister, someone he trusted. When he came back from that conversation, he looked like he'd just run a marathon. She didn't freak out, he said, almost disbelieving. She just hugged me. I smiled. Yeah, that tracks. He shook his head, laughing under his breath. She said something weird, though. What? She said, I always wondered if there was more to you than you let yourself see. I reached for his hand. Smart woman. He squeezed back. I think I'm starting to understand what you meant about being tired of pretending. From that point on, things shifted. Not dramatically but solidly. We stopped flinching when we touched in public spaces. Started sitting closer when friends were around. Nothing obvious. Just honest. One evening, we were walking back to his truck after dinner. The parking lot was quiet, the air cool. Without looking at me, Brandon reached down and laced his fingers through mine. Didn't ask. Didn't hesitate. I felt it in my chest. You okay? He asked, still not looking. Yeah, I said, squeezing back. I'm really okay. He smiled then, wide and unguarded. That's when I realized something important. This wasn't just about my best friend reacting better than I expected. It was about both of us becoming more than we thought we were allowed to be. And once that door opened, neither of us had any desire to close it again. The first time Brandon called me his boyfriend, it wasn't planned. It wasn't some big moment with dramatic eye contact or a serious talk. It slipped out of him naturally, like the word had been waiting its turn. We were at a small get-together at his sister's place, nothing wild. Just family, a couple of close friends, beers on the porch as the sun dipped low. I was standing next to him, shoulder brushing his, listening more than talking like I usually did. Someone asked, So how do you two know each other? Brandon didn't even hesitate. High school, he said. He's my boyfriend. The word landed between us like a held breath. I turned to look at him. His expression was calm, certain, no trace of panic. Yeah, he added casually, squeezing my hand. Kyle. No one freaked out. No one gasped. His sister just smiled like she already knew, and the conversation moved on. But my chest felt like it was going to burst. Later that night, when we were alone again, I finally said it. You know you said it out loud, right? He laughed softly. Yeah. And it felt right, he said simply. Did it not for you? I stepped closer, resting my forehead against his. It really did. That was when I understood something I'd been too afraid to hope for at the beginning. Brandon didn't just accept me. He chose me. Over time, the fear faded. Slowly, naturally. We told people when it made sense. Some surprised us with how easy they were about it. A few didn't. That hurt, but it didn't break us. Because by then, we were solid. He still had moments of doubt. I still had moments of insecurity. But we talked. We learned how to be patient with each other in ways neither of us had been taught before. One night, months later, we were back in that garage again. Sitting on the hood of the same car. Same music. Same quiet. Funny, Brandon said, staring out into the dark. This all started here. Yeah, I said. You asked me a question you already knew the answer to. He smiled. And you finally stopped lying. I nudged him with my shoulder. I wasn't lying. I was scared. He turned to me, serious now. So was I. Then he kissed me easy, familiar, unafraid. If you told me back then that coming out to my best friend would lead me here, I wouldn't have believed you. I expected distance, awkwardness, loss. Instead, I got honesty, growth, love I never saw coming. My best friend didn't react the way I expected. He reacted better. And sometimes, when I really look at him, I realize the scariest truth I ever told also gave me the safest place I've ever known.